I want to start by telling you two stories. First of all, Mustafa Willis. Now, in 2010, Mustafa was walking on a street in Newark, New Jersey. He had just visited with his grandmother when the Newark Police Department came up to him, showed him a gun that they had found nearby, and asked if it was his. Mustafa said, "No, not my gun." Police did not believe him. They arrested him and charged him with illegal firearms possession. Mustafa then found himself in front of a judge in Newark, and the judge set bail. Now, let me pause for a second and just clarify. What is bail? Bail is what happens to somebody who's been charged with a crime between the arrest and between the disposition of the case, either by guilty plea or by trial. Now, here in New Jersey, like much of the United States, for centuries, back to our founding as a state, the way we would set bail is based on cash. A judge would look at the case, and the judge would say, "I hereby set bail in the amount of X." In Mustafa Willis's case, the judge set bail of $50,000. Mustafa Willis did not have that much money. He worked as a truck driver's assistant. He was a hardworking guy, but he didn't have $50,000. He didn't even have the 10% that usually you have to give to a bail bonds company that will post the rest. He did not have $5,000. So what happened to Mustafa Willis? He went to jail, and he waited for 1 month, for 2 months, for 3 months. And finally, after 3 months, a prosecutor, an overworked prosecutor, finally got around to looking at the case file, and the prosecutor realized there's surveillance video that proved that was not Mustafa Willis's gun. So the prosecutor did the right thing. She dismissed the case, but not until Mustafa Willis had wasted 3 months of his life behind bars, not until Mustafa Willis had lost his job, not until Mustafa Willis had missed his cousin's funeral. That is story number one. Story number two is about a man named Roberto Grillo. Roberto Grillo was charged in 2015 with aggravated sexual assault of a minor. It is as bad as you think it is. He fled to Florida, where he was captured, arrested, brought back to New Jersey. Roberto Grillo goes in front of a judge to get bail set. How do we do it? Again, cash. Judge sets bail for Roberto Grillo of $100,000. Now, Roberto Grillo, we don't know exactly how, was able to come up with 10% of that, $10,000, and he paid his way out of jail. So he got to be free while he was waiting for trial. 6 months after he got out of jail, Roberto Grillo walked into a home, strangled and killed a 31-year-old woman in the house where she was raising her 2 teenage sons. Now, I tell you these two stories to illustrate what we call the dual system failure of our old cash bail system that we used to have here in New Jersey. As Mustafa Willis illustrates, we were locking up far too many people who were nonviolent, low-risk offenders simply because they could not post cash bail, because they didn't have enough money. On the flip side, there were too many people like Roberto Grillo who were dangerous, who posed a real risk to our safety, but because they were able to come up with cash, they could pay for their freedom. Let me take a second, introduce myself. I am Elie Honig. I'm a graduate of Rutgers College. We can, yes. And after that, I went to Harvard Law School. No love for Harvard, okay. And then I've been a lawyer since 2000, and 14 of those years I was a federal and state prosecutor. Now, when I worked here in the state attorney general's office from 2012 to 2018, I was very lucky to be part of a major criminal justice and bail reform effort. The person who gets credit for sparking this is the man you see here. This is Stuart Radner. He is the Chief Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court. And in 2013, he called together a committee. I was part of that committee. I was representing prosecutors. There were defense lawyers. There were representatives from the ACLU. There were public defenders, private defense lawyers. There were representatives of our state house. There were representatives from the governor's office. And Chief Justice Radner made very clear, we're going to put aside partisanship. There's not going to be Democrats and Republicans in this room. There's not going to be conservatives and liberals. There's not going to be prosecutors and defense lawyers. We are going to change the system the best way we know how. And that committee that I was part of, we worked very hard, and we came up with an idea to get rid of cash bail. Now, we built a cross-ideological, bipartisan or nonpartisan consensus on how to do this. Now, that said, we encountered resistance. Our idea, by the way, and we'll get into this more in a moment, was let's get rid of cash bail and move to a system based entirely on risk. Who would be against this? Well, first of all, who stands to lose? The bail bonds industry. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry that takes money from people who've been arrested, posts the bond, and then charges them outrageous interest. They were furious opponents of this proposed change. Some politicians, many of whom had taken money, not illegally, but taken campaign donations from the bail bonds industry. Some politicians here in New Jersey did not like it, and I will tell you candidly, some pockets of law enforcement did not like it. There were police chiefs, including this gentleman I show here, and prosecutors who I had to stand up in front of and speak and explain why this is not going to be dangerous. Let me show you some of the propaganda that was put out to try to stop us from reforming the criminal justice system. This is just a few examples of ads that were taken out by our opponents. You get the picture here. They're trying to scare people. Bail reform is going to be terrifying. There's a skeleton. There's a ghost. Abuse of the elderly. Nonsensical, non-factual, scare-based tactics to try to prevent us from reforming the system. Now, that said, we built such a strong coalition that we were able to pass a law and change our state constitution to go from that cash-based system to a risk-based system. And I do have to note we did this in a truly bipartisan way. Our governor at the time was a Republican, Chris Christie, who you see here. Our state Senate was controlled by Democrats, and our state assembly was controlled by Democrats. So it's not often that you see this kind of bipartisan agreement, but we reached it here. So let me explain how our new system works. Throw out cash bail. Now our system is based on risk. We have an algorithm that was developed using tens of thousands of real-life examples. And what happens if a person gets arrested is everyone will receive a risk score for that individual. 1 to 6, 1 being low, 6 being high. First of all, failure to appear. What's the risk this person will not appear in court? Then, what's the risk that this person will commit a new criminal activity? And then, what's the risk that this person will commit a new violent criminal activity? Now, if you're thinking, I'm not so sure I'm okay with that, you're not alone. Because a lot of people had this fear. Well, why are we going to automate this system? We're talking about human beings. If any of you have seen the movie from the 1990s, Minority Report. Has anyone seen this? Tom Cruise, a few people my age have seen it. Kids, you should see it. It's a great movie, and it presents this sort of dystopian view of the future, where the cops are arresting people for future crimes. You're under arrest for the anticipated murder of this person or that person. It's sort of a scary movie, but that's the point. And people thought, are we going to be like that? And the answer that I would give when I was speaking about this in advance was no. These numbers, this algorithm, they are there to guide us, but they're not mandatory. Everyone still has to do their jobs. Prosecutors, if you think someone's dangerous, go argue it to the judge. Defense lawyers, you think your client's not dangerous and should be let out, argue it to the judge. Judges, do your job, weigh the facts, and judge. And I'm proud to say that we've now had this system in place for 6 years. We started this brand new system in 2017. There was a lot of skepticism. Would it work? We now have the data to show us conclusively that yes, not only has this worked, but it has been a smashing success. Our violent crime rates, the first year after we went to a risk-based system, went down 5.3%, another 10% after that, continued to decline after that. I'm not telling you that the sole reason we had lower crime rates was because we switched over to a risk system, but I will tell you that it was one factor, and I will tell you that heaven help us if crime rates had risen even by 0.1% that first year, our political opponents would have pounced. The other thing, even more dramatically, at the same time we're reducing violent crime rates, we are also massively reducing our pretrial incarcerated population. The number of people who are waiting behind bars who've not yet been proven guilty. First year of the system, it went down 20%. Next year, another 12%. And we kept those numbers nice and low. You'll notice they tick back up in 2021. You all can imagine why that was. COVID came in, essentially closed down our courts, prevented us from really doing trials. I did speak with the Chief Justice recently. He said we are quite confident we will be able to get those numbers back down now that everything's back on track. And I want you to just take a moment to think about that. In one stroke, we were able to reduce violent crime rates and substantially reduce the number of people behind bars. It's the kind of reform success that I think we study and dream about here at Rutgers University. We've received praise for what we did in the national media. New York Times, New Jersey is in the front line in a national battle over bail. Washington Post, fixing the unfair bail system is worth the cost. Huffington Post, report grades bail systems across the U.S., and only one state gets an A. Guess what state that is? New Jersey, yes. We are very proud of what we did here in New Jersey. Unfortunately, if you go across the Hudson River into New York, you will see a very different bail system that has received a very different public reception. If you walk by a bodega or a newsstand now, you will see endless headlines blaming bail reform for mayhem, for violence, for increased crime rates. So what went wrong in New York? We tried to warn them, by the way. Here's a piece that I co-wrote right when New York was getting ready to do its system, entitled, "New York, please read this. Your bail reform is in trouble because you're making two big mistakes." You probably won't be surprised to learn New Yorkers don't love to take advice from New Jerseyites, but they should have listened to us, and they didn't. What are the two big mistakes that we told New York you are making? Number one, their system did not allow prosecutors to argue or judges to consider the danger that a person posed. All the prosecutors were allowed to argue, all the judges were allowed to consider is this person likely to flee? Is this person likely to miss a court date? You are not allowed to consider the dangerousness of the person. Think back to Roberto Grillo. The second problem with New York's system is they had too many crimes, far too serious of crimes, on a list of automatic release, meaning if a person is charged with these crimes, they automatically get out pending trial. Here's a couple crimes on that list. Second-degree manslaughter, automatically out. Stalking, automatically out. Assault as a hate crime, automatically out. Aggravated assault on a child under 11 years old, automatically out. We wrote this piece, they didn't listen to us, and they've had major problems since then. I want to just close today with a quote, and this is one of my favorite quotes. Here's what it is. The problem, simply stated, is the rich man and the poor man do not receive equal justice in our courts. And in no area is this more evident than in the matter of bail. Bail has become a vehicle for systematic injustice. Every year in this country, thousands of persons are kept in jail for weeks and even months following arrest. They are not yet proven guilty. They may be no more likely to flee than you or I. But nonetheless, most of them must stay in jail because, to be blunt, they cannot afford to pay for their freedom. Now, I haven't revealed yet the source of this quote or the year of this quote, but I think that's what really drives it home for me. This is from testimony that Robert F. Kennedy, when he was Attorney General of the United States, gave to the Senate in 1964. 1964. And the reason I love this quote is because I think it perfectly captures the need to engage in crucial criminal justice reform, but also it reminds us there's no mystery to this. We've known this for over 50 years now, and it took us decades, really centuries, to get it together, to get over our partisan divisions, to get over our political hang-ups, and to get this reform done. I am proud to say we persevered, we rose above, and we did it here in the state of New Jersey. And I hope this is a lesson as to what you can do if you keep your eye on the big picture, if you put aside left or right, and if you focus on what's in the best interests of all of us. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to be here back at Rutgers.